After-action report detailing the matchup between the Ursine Socialists and Neurohelm buffering. The mission was a straight fight between both teams, with the victory determined by highest percentage of battle value surviving at the end of the match. It is noteworthy that turn timers were in effect for this matchup, 60 seconds for each movement and 30 seconds for each shooting or physical to ensure all competitors would not take too long. The map itself was a hexagonal layout of 12 hexes on each side, randomly chosen from a selection of custom maps by role. The map this round featured an urban layout with a significant number of height 2 or more buildings blocking line of sight for the mechs on the field, meaning that both teams would either need to open up lines of fire through demolition or maneuver to maximize the amount of enemies exposed to fire while minimizing the risk of return fire. Of note, there were 4 fuel tanks near the center of the map of magnitude 20, which would generate an explosion that would do damage out to 3 hexes from the fuel tank itself, starting at 20 from the fuel tank hex and dropping by 5 per hex. Though difficult to compromise in a single round, said fuel tanks would be best avoided to prevent a dangerous blast. Pavement also dominated a significant portion of the map, requiring mechs to be wary of when they chose to run or risk a fall and skid. The Ursine Socialists brought a team of close-in fighters with good jump capability. Rathius Prime went in for a double mech approach, taking twin Night Sky 6Ts. Both mechs were equipped with a hatchet and the triple-strength myomer to make them hit like a unit twice their size. In addition, the design had a laser loadout that would make moderating their heat to keep the TSM active a relatively easy task. The 6 jump jets would make maneuvering in the city trivial, as they could easily position their mechs on any turn in the city since no building was large enough to prevent them from jumping over it. Without any heat weapons or access to inferno missiles, Neurohelm would have to rely on damage to punish these mechs when they closed in. Dapper Apples took a Rakshasa, a heavy skirmisher mech with the armor and speed to make it difficult to remove if it pushed in with the medium mechs and hard to outrange in the map unless it allowed itself to be. It was backed up by a Star League-era Crab, a jumping pulse mech that would be able to punish any exposed rear torso armor it could jump in range of. Neurohelm buffering retained their assault mechs for this matchup. Sacred's longbow would be instrumental in punishing close-in assaults with the Night Skies, especially as the Socialists possessed none of the countermeasures for the mech's Artemis systems that the previous 2 opponents had to curtail its firepower. The Spider would be of more nebulous value this match, although between the elite pilot of the longbow and the Spider's mobility, it would be able to provide spotting for indirect fire to even out any small battle value disadvantages and land early hits on the opponent before they could reach firing range. Lincoln would be aiming to take the role of distraction and supporting fire for this match, as the Annihilator would be less capable of evading the jumping mechs and punishing them, though its higher tonnage and heavier loadout would hopefully present a larger apparent threat to the incoming medium mechs. The Charger was intended to serve similar, as its movement profile would have difficulty punishing the high jump attackers and serve primarily as a defense for the other 2 mechs or a sink for enemy fire. Neurohelm buffering would elect to deploy from the western side of the arena, and the Ursine Socialists would deploy from the east. Neurohelm's assault mechs were positioned to take advantage of the large light building and narrow streets to protect the back of the mechs from an attempt by the Socialists to attack their rear armor. The Socialists, meanwhile, would deploy their units to avoid line of sight with the Neurohelm mechs until they can get to range with their own weaponry. Round 1, the Socialists moved up, being wary of a blast from the fuel tanks in the middle of the map. The longbow and Charger moved down a northern street with the Annihilator providing rear cover, while the Spider approached the bulk of the Socialist forces to establish spotting for indirect fire in subsequent turns. The Socialists would target some buildings with laser weaponry to activate the triple-strength myomer of the Night Skies, while Neurohelm would demolish some of the light buildings to open up future lines of fire. The Charger would make an error in round 2, positioning near a building that provided insufficient cover to block line of sight from the Socialist mechs. The Crab would run close to the medium building to the south of the Annihilator, preparing to go for a jump should one of the Neurohelm mechs expose themselves while the Night Skies covered the Rakshasa. The Spider would run south to establish spotting on the Rakshasa, as well as potentially pull one of the Night Skies into chasing it. Some potshots were taken by both sides, but only the longbow managed to connect with anything, damaging the armor of the White Night Sky. The Spider was sent further to the east in round 3 to try once more to bait away one of the Socialist mechs. Undeterred by this gambit, the Socialists consolidated their mechs to the south of the medium building and well within jump range of the Neurohelm assault mechs who had been backed up to prevent an attempt to take rear shots by the enemy. As neither team would have an angle on their opponents this round, they would take time to demolish more buildings and maintain optimal TSM heat levels. Neurohelm Buffering's initiative victory in round 4 pushed the Socialists into a defensive stance. Then they would consolidate their jumping units in the southwest corner while the Rakshasa hurried to catch up. The Spider was sent back to establish spotting for the longbow again, but Neurohelm elected to take advantage of the close range and low TMM of the White Night Sky and moved the longbow to target it with SRMs. This would expose the longbow to all 3 of the Socialist medium mechs, and while it would strip about 2 tons of armor from Night Sky White, the longbow would receive enough damage to expose one of its vulnerable side torsos. Neurohelm would back up in round 5 to protect the damaged longbow, and the Socialists would maintain the building between them and the Neurohelm units, refusing to allow themselves to be baited into pursuing the damaged unit and expose their own mechs. The Spider would once again be used to establish spotting for the longbow, who would chip some more armor from the damaged Night Sky. The Socialists continued to keep the medium building between themselves and the Annihilator, sweeping their Night Skies south to come around the corner and their Rakshasa and Crab northeast to pincer Neurohelm. Neurohelm responded by committing the longbow and charger to assaulting the Night Skies, hoping to take one of the melee mechs off the board. In the process, the White Night Sky took more damage, while the longbow continued to lose important torso armor. Neither mech received critical damage, and the Black Night Sky would have its armor dented by the charger at the cost of nearly losing an arm to the Night Sky's hatchet. Ursine Socialists won the initiative in round 7, so Neurohelm focused on presenting a difficult target for them to attack, as it was assumed that the Socialists would continue to try to remove the longbow from play. The longbow was moved to place its back to the wall of the arena, and the Annihilator was backed up to allow for some shots if the Socialists placed mechs near the longbow. The charger was left in its initial position for as long as possible to force the Socialist Night Skies to jump to reach any other Neurohelm mech. Ursine Socialists would respond to this move by sending the less damaged Night Sky to melee range of the longbow, though they withheld their other Night Sky and the charger was pulled back to prevent it from closing to melee range as well. The Spider was jumped behind the Black Night Sky while other Socialist mechs closed around Neurohelm, close enough to attack in the next round but still out of sight. All of Neurohelm's mechs would end up focusing on the Black Night Sky, blowing off a leg and damaging the engine of the mech. The Black Night Sky would do more damage to the torsos of the longbow, but failed to finish it off as the loss of its leg would prevent it from bringing its hatchet down on the missile boat. Both Neurohelm and the Socialists would end up destroying a significant amount of the light building as well, opening up even more lines of sight for the next round. The Socialists' initiative loss in round 8 meant that they would be unable to press into melee with the longbow again this round, and they opted to stand the White Night Sky still while the Crab was repositioned to the north. The charger would take advantage of this move with the Night Sky to initiate a charge against the mech. This would expose the rear of the charger to the Rakshasa, but the extra damage from the additional distance was considered worth the risk. The longbow was sent south to present its rear armor to the Socialist mechs, which at this point would provide more protection than what little was left on the front of the mech. The Rakshasa would open up on the charger, destroying a small laser and damaging some of the internal structure of the assault, but it would not do enough to prevent the mech from attempting the charge. Night Sky White and the Crab aimed for the rear of the longbow, damaging the Artemis systems of one of the MML launchers but failing to penetrate the rear armor of the longbow. The longbow flipped its arms and put 4 of its MML launchers into Night Sky White, cracking some engine shielding in the right torso after blowing through the armor. The Annihilator split fire between the Rakshasa and Night Sky White, sending cluster rounds at the heavy mech and pulse lasers at the medium. The charger would complete its charge in the melee phase, destroying the engine of the White Night Sky and taking it out of commission. The Annihilator took a kick at the Black Night Sky, nearly crushing its left arm. The heat Night Sky Black generated trying to fire its full alpha strike at the longbow would provide too much for the mech to handle, and the Night Sky would end up shutting down in the heat phase. With Neurohelm still holding the initiative in round 9 and the Socialists effectively down 2 mechs, the Rakshasa and Crab were pulled out of line of sight of the longbow and Annihilator. The longbow and Spider began to chase down the Rakshasa, looking to set up more indirect fire on the heavy while the charger went ahead and initiated a new charge against the Crab. The Annihilator took aim at the shutdown Night Sky with its pulse lasers, destroying its right torso and its XL engine there. The longbow scored a few indirect hits with its LRMs, and the Crab threw its pulse lasers against the charger, blowing off the right arm but failing to do enough damage to stop the incoming charge. The crab would be knocked to the ground by the charge, putting it in an unfortunate corner as it would be unable to escape melee of the charger in the following round, given the mech's speed and buildings surrounding it. In round 10, the crab would back up against a building, but without the ability to jump, it would be the recipient of a second charge by the charger. The Rakshasa ran southwest to try and attack the longbow, which backed up to put it in a position where the Annihilator could cover it from any attack by the Socialist Rakshasa. The Spider pursued the Rakshasa, seeking out rear shots and melee. The Annihilator would manage to establish line of sight on the crab as well, and sent several rounds downrange at it, though only one would hit. The Spider would trade shots with the Rakshasa, and both mechs would come out with some internal torso damage. The crab put its full alpha strike into the charger, successfully landing all 4 lasers, but the charger would power right through the onslaught, landing the second charge and knocking the crab over into a building. Round 11, the crab continued to back up away from the charger, but would once again not have enough speed to clear melee range without its jump jets. Unable to execute another charge due to the building in the way, the charger stepped through the building intent on kicks this round. In the south, the Rakshasa would find the longbow, but would be facing the full force of the Annihilator and Spider as well. The 3 mechs would end up destroying over half the Rakshasa's armor, as well as damaging half of the heavy mech's weaponry. The Rakshasa still achieved its objective, destroying the left torso of the longbow and its engine. Up north, another alpha strike from the crab would destroy a small laser and strip more armor and structure from the assault mech, but the charger would remain standing to trade kicks with the crab. Both mechs would crit out multiple components in the legs, and even the Spider would damage the hip of the Rakshasa with its kick, sending both the crab and Rakshasa to the ground. In round 12, the Rakshasa successfully stood up on a damaged hip but failed its attempt to run. The following fall turned worse when the pilot blacked out from damage, and the heavy mech would be obliterated by the Annihilator blowing up the left torso of the XL engine mech. The crab was able to stand up in round 13 and claim a kill on the charger that had been harassing it, but the damage to its actuators meant the mech had few maneuvering options, and a final exchange of shots in round 14 ended with the crab destroyed and Neurohelm holding the field, though the crab nearly managed to take the Spider with it. Neurohelm's move with the longbow in round 4 was a high-risk move for a low probability of good payoff. Exposing the longbow to fire from all of the medium mechs allowed the longbow to take significant damage that resulted in the mech being put into a state where a single good hit to the left torso could end it permanently. The longbow survived subsequent rounds long enough for Neurohelm to force the Socialists to pay a steep cost to kill it, but placing it in the position where the opponents could shoot at it without risking the guns of the Annihilator as well was risky in the extreme. A more conservative movement could have had the longbow move 1 hex less without any loss of TMM and maintaining short range on the white night sky while preventing the black night sky from being able to add its firepower to the fight at all. Alternatively, Neurohelm could just as easily refuse to engage again, taking advantage of the Spider's position to put indirect fire into the crab, while forcing the Socialists to engage into the guns of both assault mechs. The Socialists' hesitance to engage rounds 3 through 6 was well considered. They consistently ignored the Spider to bar opportune shots, preventing Neurohelm's attempt to bait one of their higher value units away from the fight, and waited until the Rakshasa had the ability to move in alongside their own high mobility units. Ultimately, it would be Neurohelm who would break the stalemate, as an initiative win allowed them to move to punish the Night Skies, who had accepted a lower TMM to put themselves into a better position for the next round of combat in round 6. One of the strengths of high jump units in a tight environment like the Van Zandt arenas is the ability to pick when the engagement happens. When combating this with a slower force, the important thing is to prevent the jumpers from being able to find backshots, or if this is impossible, then ensure that seeking out these backshots come at a cost. In the urban map of this match, the jumpers would have the advantage of being able to close in without threat of direct fire, avoid any of the normal PSRs from closing in quickly, and reach optimal range at the same time. However, the same buildings that protected the lighter mechs from long-range shots would make seeking out rear shots difficult, as most buildings were either too light to support the weight of a medium mech, or would be too easy to damage and collapse under the weight of one of the mediums. This would have knocked that mech prone and as a result put it in danger of being unable to escape in the following rounds due to an inability to jump away. We can see this with the crab and charger in rounds 8 to 11. The Socialists were presumably seeking a round where they could punish either the longbow or Annihilator with minimal threat of retaliation from one or the other assault mech. They finally found a chance to assault the longbow in round 7, but were unable to get more than one mech into position without risking putting a unit in the Annihilator's full sights.